So if you're dealing with autoimmune issues, in this video I'm going to give you 5 triggers that seem to have the ability to create this trouble that a lot of people don't know about. I'm even going to give you one issue that's likely happening in your kitchen right now and share some studies that show that it has the ability to create this trouble. It's probably just going to freak you out a little bit. But I also want to help you understand that there are strong feelings about autoimmune issues, that being genetic and oh, your mom had this, so sorry about your luck, you get this too. And just know that that's not always the case. In most cases that I've seen, there's actual underlying causes that are creating these troubles, and there are underlying causes that can be improved. Now, for most people, it's not just going to be one of these things that we go over. There's usually more than one thing contributing to the problem at one time, but when you can get an idea of what's creating trouble for you, then it's just about putting in the effort to create some improvement. So the first thing that we need to understand is this barrier failure when we're looking at autoimmune issues. So let's better understand leaky gut or increased intestinal permeability to understand what's really going on. And we'll look at this study here on associations between increased intestinal permeability and disease. And they help us understand that when somebody's dealing with this leaky gut, it's very strongly associated with these autoimmune issues. So to understand this, we're basically looking at the lining of your intestinal tract here. And then just on the other side of that lining is the bloodstream. So basically we have these tight junctions here so that bad viruses and bacteria and food particles and things don't get through into the bloodstream where they really don't belong. This is really just open enough to allow the nutrients from the food that we eat to get into the bloodstream, so then we can utilize those nutrients and we can function as if we're a human being. Wouldn't that be cool? But a lot of troubles can create extra space here where these junctions are not so tight, and now all these bad guys are getting in, and also food particles are getting in there. So since a lot of our immune cells exist here in the bloodstream, that has the ability to send our immune system into overdrive. Now if food particles get in that are undigested, now those food particles still have an identity. Your body is not used to these food particles coming into the system like that. It's looking for vitamins and minerals and amino acids and fats. It's not looking for chicken sandwich. It doesn't know what chicken sandwich is. So when chicken sandwich that's not digested correctly gets through these bigger junctions into the bloodstream, well, now this is going to set off some alarms. This is going to make your body go to war against a chicken sandwich. So this has the ability to create a lot of inflammation from the immune system overreacting and create a lot of these autoimmune type issues. So let's look here and understand how number 2 of digestive failure has the ability to magnify that reaction. So basically, when we consume food, we're supposed to acidify it here in the stomach, and then when it leaves down here, this alkaline bile comes down and helps neutralize that. The pancreas squirts out bicarb and all these enzymes, and all these digestive functions take place that help us break that food down, conquer the food, and access the nutrients inside that food. So we're breaking the food down into elemental nutrients. The problem is, it's very common today for someone not to be making enough stomach acid for a wide variety of reasons. Millions of people turn off stomach acid on a daily basis on purpose. But even if a person is just stressed, that has the ability to restrict the body from making enough stomach acid to really acidify that food and start that breakdown function. And even worse, it's this acidic food leaving the stomach that actually triggers a lot of hormones that make a lot of these other functions happen correctly as well. So if someone is not making enough stomach acid, or maybe their bile here in the gallbladder has become too thick and sticky to flow correctly, either of those things going wrong is now going to disrupt that digestive process, and we're not going to really break down the food the way that we're supposed to. Now there's going to be more undigested food particles getting through those open junctions and setting off the alarms in that immune system. So this is a really big deal. It's very common to see digestive malfunctions with people today. I'm not going to dig into how to fix all that. I've talked about that in 7,000 videos, but I'll have a link in the description below for our video on full digestive reset. If you're having any digestive symptoms at all, that's a sign that these systems are not working correctly and they really need to be corrected. So you might have a little bit of homework with some of these things that we're going to talk about, but we're just going to kind of help you understand the things that can go wrong, and the things that really seem to jump out to you. We'll have links in the description below for all these topics, and you can dig deeper into those so you can make corrections to those problems. And just keep in mind that if your doctor is telling you to take some type of acid reflux medication that turns off stomach acid, I'm not telling you to stop doing that. Remember, I'm not a doctor. I'm not giving anybody medical advice. I'm basically a professional stand-up comic turned nutrition author, because when I lost my voice for 8 years and 23 different doctors couldn't figure that out, I had to dig for my own answers. So now for 20 years, I've been teaching health professionals in more than 40 countries how to help their clients fix the actual underlying causes of problems instead of just covering up the symptoms. But we'll have the links to all these studies below so you can dig through these and figure out the right questions to ask your doctor. But let's look at number 3 here, which is microbial imbalance. And we'll look at this study here on the gut microbiota, emerging evidence in autoimmune and inflammatory disease. And they say increased gut permeability exposes the immune system to bacterial components and pro-inflammatory metabolites, perpetuating chronic inflammation and displacing commensal bacteria. So it's not just when there's bad guys here in the gut, we get this dysbiosis or we have all this bad bacteria in there. It's not just the bacteria being there, it's a lot of the metabolites and waste products that they put out that have the ability to really magnify the inflammation. And it's inflammation that has the ability to damage this gut lining. So a lot of the things that can create inflammation you're going to see have the ability to create damage here that opens up these junctions and lets all the stuff in where it really shouldn't be. So one thing to think about is a bacterial overgrowth can happen here in the large intestine, but it could also happen in the small intestine, or a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, or SIBO, like all the cool kids have today. Or there can even be an overgrowth in the stomach, like an H. pylori situation. We also need to consider that a lot of people feel like it's yeast, mold, and fungal type issues like candida and such that have the ability to create the most amount of trouble with that intestinal lining. So we don't want to just look at bacteria, we want to think at other possible overgrowth type issues that can create a lot of trouble here. Which leads us to number 4, which is just a systemic inflammatory load. When that gets a little bit high, that has the ability to create some trouble. And what's interesting about this, when we're looking at this, microbial overgrowth type situation that can happen in the digestive tract, it's not just that some type of overgrowth has the ability to create inflammation. That study was showing us that when there's a problem with that barrier and there's a leaky gut issue, now the trouble that comes from that overgrowth is really magnified because of all those byproduct and waste issues that they're putting out that are getting into that bloodstream. But this increase in an inflammatory load could come from a wide variety of things in the body. So let's talk about that tricky thing that can happen in your kitchen that has to do with AGEs, or advanced glycation end products. And these can occur and be developed in the body when blood sugar is high, and it's just really about sugars attaching to proteins and fats and creating a lot of inflammation and trouble in the body. But we can also bring these AGEs into this system because of the way that we're cooking or preparing our food, or because we're eating a lot of processed junk food that are very high in these AGEs. So if we're cooking with a lot of high dry heat methods like grilling or broiling or baking or frying or even air frying, all of those have the ability to really escalate the level of AGEs in the foods that we're bringing in. So now we're increasing the number of AGEs in the system. So let's look at this study here on advanced glycation end products and their effects on gut health. And this study helped us understand that when the body is bringing in a lot of AGEs, or a lot of AGEs are being created in the system, that will increase the number of receptors for these AGEs, or RAGEs as they're called. And what happens is the more receptors there are, the more those AGEs can attach to those receptors, and when they attach, it creates this inflammatory cycle that can basically create damage for structures around. So when these AGE receptors are occurring in the digestive tract, that has the ability to damage these structures here and make that gap a little bit wider and create more permeability. So that study talked a lot about how these AGEs going high seems to have the ability to actually create this leaky gut issue that can lead to these autoimmune issues. So I'm not going to dig too far into this. We have a lot of videos on this. I'll put a link in the description below for our videos on cooking methods that can reduce these AGEs and supplements that can help reduce these and other steps you can take to bring that down. But if your blood sugar is high, that can be another factor. This study on association of glycemic variability with oxidative stress and AGE accumulation in type 2 diabetes is talking about how it's not just always about blood sugar going high. When you're getting these spikes and crashes, that can create a lot of trouble as well. And this usually comes from people eating too many processed carbs, sugars, and junk. So, having a poor diet becomes a really big deal and something that we really need to correct if we're dealing with autoimmune type issues. So remember, this blood sugar going high can also cause the body to create more AGEs in the body, no matter what a person is eating, really. And another problem is when we become insulin resistant from eating too many carbs and sugars and making insulin go too high too often, that has the ability to increase visceral fat, or fat that is stored around our organs. So let's look at this study here on intestinal permeability as associated with visceral adiposity in healthy women. And they're seeing a strong association between elevated visceral fat and these leaky gut type issues. And I don't think that's always the case. I don't feel like it's just visceral fat is causing leaky gut and autoimmune issues. But like we talked about before, with most people, there's going to be more than one factor contributing to these problems. And number 5 is just nervous system overload, and that could be coming from, sleep troubles, poor sleep, or a lot of stress in the system, or circadian disruption where maybe somebody is being awake when they really should be sleeping, or they're trying to sleep when there's light out and things like that. And this study on circadian clock issues says circadian disruption may compromise immune function, increasing infection susceptibility and autoimmunity. And something else to think about when we're looking at, circadian rhythm disruption issues is that some people can kind of get stuck in one state most of the time. Like, we're supposed to be in a more catabolic state during the day and a more anabolic state at night. And if somebody's stuck in that catabolic state where the body is supposed to be really good at breaking itself down so that it can be rebuilt and repaired at night, if a person is really stuck in that catabolic state most of the time, then they're not moving into that rebuilding and repair state. And now that intestinal lining that was kind of broken down a little bit is not rebuilding and repairing the way that it should. So if you want to see if that might be a problem for you, we'll have a link in the description below for our video on 10 signs of a catabolic imbalance to see if that may be something that's restricting your body from fixing these issues. And then chronic diarrhea is not something that we're talking about. I think I left that up there from the last video, so you can just ignore that I even put that there. So you can see there's a wide variety of issues that seem to have the ability to contribute to these autoimmune issues. And that leaky gut issue is a really big problem that allows a lot of things to cause a lot more trouble. These AGE issues are going to be a big problem for a lot of people. We'll have videos that'll help you improve that scenario in the description below. But if you feel like you already have a leaky gut issue now, you can jump over right now and check out our video on 4 steps to improve leaky gut. And we talk there about some other steps and supplements that might be wrong for some people and things you can do to improve that situation. I can't wait to hear about your results.